Hey y'all, I'm Karen Mayer Cunningham, the special education boss. If you've ever felt confused, overwhelmed, or just plain frustrated at the 504 IEP table, you are in the right place. Every week, I'm breaking down the rules, the rights, and the realities of special education so you can walk into meetings informed, empowered, and ready to make real change. And whether you're a parent, a teacher, an advocate, a school-based member, or somebody who's just trying to do right by a student, this podcast gives you straight talk, real answers, and tools that you can use immediately. I'm not here to play politics. I'm not here to play sides. I'm here to train people who sit at the table and teach you how to follow the law, ask the right questions, and protect the rights of students. So go ahead and hit subscribe, share this with a friend, and you know what? Meet me back here every single week. We're not just talking about change. We're making it. Because when you know better, you do better. And when we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody.
Hey guys, we're in day one, how to advocate for anyone. We're going to talk about sort of three things as it relates to eligibilities: medical diagnosis versus educational need, comorbidities, and eligibility in order. So as we all know, there is that famous saying, once we got them in the pool, it doesn't matter. So there is no pool in special education. We would have to have people that were trained to use it. And it's not one size fits all. That's why it's called special education, and SDI says specifically designed instruction. So how important are eligibilities and how important are medical diagnoses? So they're both equally important, right? So a medical diagnosis could rise to the threshold of being needed to be either on a 504 or an IEP. But as it relates to an IEP, the acuity of that medical diagnosis impacts a student to a degree that we have to write an IEP goal around it, which means there has to be instruction around it, right? SDI. So we know that a student has a disability and they're in fact in need of specially designed instruction, which is a fancy way of saying they need a goal. And here's how you know it's specially designed instruction. It's special, there's instruction, right? So an accommodation, not specially designed instruction, to the chagrin of some special education directors. And so it's instruction. Accommodation is not an instruction. So be sure that you've got that right in your paperwork. Again, there were, we had questions about, when is an effectual 504? And I tongue in cheek always say a 504 is never good for anything. I'm certain that there are a few 504s that are appropriate as it relates to a child with disability. Haven't ever run across one because there is no instruction. And we're not measuring anything, right? The reason we've identified a child has a disability is because there's a need that we need to mitigate, build a bridge, or remove, right? And we do that providing instruction above what the general education teacher can do. So I've had lots of schools say, well, we can't put the medical diagnosis in the present levels. We can, because they're present and they're his levels. So you just simply say student meets this criteria for special education. You read those eligibility criteria categories, and then we put comma and has a medical condition of, and then list whatever that medical condition is. As it relates to eligibility categories, those are a committee decision. So we could say Billy meets eligibility in math computation, math calculation, written expression, reading fluency, and reading comprehension. And then for whatever reason, as a committee, as we collaborated, agreed that the most appropriate eligibility would just be reading comprehension. Again, everything is a committee decision. There's a difference between being prepared and predetermined. And so you want to make sure as you sit in a meeting that you're not bringing information that's predetermined and you're just letting parents say yes or no. That's not collaboration. IDEA was built on the consensus model. It doesn't mean we come to consensus, but it means that I can articulate the other person's position with clarity. So, the word consider, which is one of the worst words that the hearing officers use, that we would consider something, is so ambiguous, but it's so vague. But we're supposed to have a conversation. We're supposed to be able to collaborate. We're supposed to be able to work in a manner that's on the consensus model. So those eligibilities drive services, needs, and supports. And so it's very important that we make sure that we have identified any suspected disability. any suspected disability. And so that's why you have to know all of them and what their impact is and what the probability when you're working with a family or the family that you're going to serve, what may be there. As it relates to some of the disabilities, some of these sort of naturally, for lack of a better word, show up later. And what I mean by that is they all are my favorite depending on what given day it's on. But definitely SLDs are my jam. There are 9 specific learning disabilities. 9. Dyslexia, of course, is a specific learning disability, unless somebody told you that it wasn't, but it still is, right? And so specific learning disabilities as it relates for students in special education are dyslexia, reading fluency, basic reading, reading comprehension, written expression, oral expression, math computation, math calculations, and listening expression. And that's a lot of them. We'll really unpack that tomorrow when we're doing a deep dive into evaluations and when I'm training you guys how to explain the acuity, the importance of a cognitive evaluation. It's one of my favorite things. If you really understood simply the cognitive processes for a human, you could probably mitigate all but 10% of their bad choices in life. A cognitive profile never changes. It doesn't change. So that's really important to know. So a lot of times you'll have a client that'll have an evaluation. They're like, oh, his cognitive process as it relates to fluid reasoning is in the 27 percentile. What can I do to work on that? Right? Do glasses make my natural eyes see better? No, they don't. Right? So a specific learning disability additionally is eye color. It is what it is. They're usually identified a little bit later, probably 3rd grade, because people are going in asking for that dyslexia screener, right? And it's just the word that we know. So those 4 reading disabilities, dyslexia, basic reading, reading fluency, and reading comprehension are 4 different things. They're not the same thing. Please stop telling me that you're sitting in an Orton Gillingham, reading by design, Nyhouse, you're in a dyslexia program. That's not reading fluency. It's not. There are kiddos that have reading fluency and they don't have dyslexia. So, we just had a kiddo this week identified with 3 SLDs. He's been in dyslexia for 4 years and he's 1/3 of the way through. He's an 8th grader. Okay, I don't think 8th graders are working on decoding. And whatever awful strategy he taught himself, he already taught himself. So I'm not going to spend my time in dyslexia anymore, although he meets criteria, because I have to figure out as an advocate, what is the best use of his time, right? There's only this much pie of the day, right? Am I going to still be going to 45 minutes 4 times a week to dyslexia? No, he's going into high school. I got to get him with what? A reading interventionist. I got to get him somebody that knows all 4 of those components of a reading disability and how they impact them across settings. So really want to make sure that you understand specific learning disabilities. We're going to go over them more in depth in a little bit, but it's probably the most unidentified disability nationally. In LD and AA would say it's 33% of adults. Other stats say 25% of adults. That's a large percentage of adults that have a specific learning disability. And because it's specific, it's unexpected, right? It's an unexpected pattern in your cognitive processes and your achievement. People can make up for it, right, with their other splintered skills. So again, we don't necessarily see it, right? We're using all of that bandwidth to cover it. And so even for kiddos, I've had kiddos that are gifted that have a specific learning disability. They're not exempt of each other. I have a lovely little girl in at the Dallas area who's has cortical vision impairment, and she also has a learning disability. And her mom is working right now with Dr. Justin Porter in Texas to get that as a guideline. So we just think we have all these assumptions that if you have a vision impairment, you can have a specific learning disability. Really? Where's that list of what you can and can't have? So really important that you know that. So medical diagnosis, educational need, right? There's three models. Write this down. There are three models, and there is the medical model, there's a therapeutic model, and there's an education model. So there's a medical model, a therapeutic model, and an educational model. The problem is they don't play nice together, right? And if you've ever had all of them in the same room, they really don't play nice together. And I've had, not so much with the medical world, but I have had people from ABA or outside therapists that can be a little condescending to school-based members because they're using fancy schmancy words that school-based members don't necessarily use. So I'm not a big fan of that. When somebody wants to bring, 8,000 of their providers to a meeting, I said, great, do they know how to mute themselves? And what I mean by that is the more people you have in the meeting, the more people you have in the meeting. And I mean, look at Congress, right? It doesn't mean like you have more stuff getting done. It's just a larger volume of people. And, if Alicia is my BCBA and she's rocking it out, I'm certainly going to have her come to the meeting if that's what the parent wants. However, I'm going to have her provide me a summary letter of what that student's working on, their areas of need, their growth, kind of where that he stalled. And then I'll provide that summary letter to the committee so that it says cumulative folder, right? We can reference that. I'll also give the district or the county consent via the parent to talk to Alicia as his BCBA. We always want to collaborate, but you speak different languages, right? We speak a certain language in special ed, we speak a certain language in the medical world, and we speak a certain language in the therapeutic world, and it often gets a kiddo less service because we really can say that's a different setting, right? Doctors, they understand DSM, they understand diagnosis, right? And they might give a diagnosis that doesn't correlate to education. Our job as an advocate is to take all of that information, all of the things about the sweet care, and make it fit in one of the puzzle pieces in an IEP, right? And so sometimes you have to convert that. You have to caution doctors in their letters, or you have to help the doctors. You have to caution the BTBA or the therapist or whoever in kind of how they communicate with the committee. So that's one of the reasons they don't play well together. So I have lots of great people that I work with that are good at working with committees, but it's really, I think from the school's position, they feel a little bit outmanned because those specialists, they are specialists, right? If you are a BCBA all day long and that's what you do, that's your wheelhouse. You may not be the 24-year-old resource teacher that even has any idea what you're talking about. And so when you're bringing other people into the meeting, make sure that you've prepped them. We say in court, the hardest expert witness is the parent, as they can't follow that model of I'm asking you a question and then you just give that answer. They just start talking, right? But they're the expert. So it's really important that you prep all of those people ahead of time. You jump on a Zoom and say, hey, Andrea, I know that you are the best, international tumbler, and he has tumbling therapy. However, I have your summary letter. If I say, hey, Andrea, could you share with, how tumble therapy has helped him with his social skills, then that's the entree. But I don't want those persons with their knowledge causing a bigger gap at the meeting. Does that make sense? And so a lot of times parents are getting that service because they know about them. That's their new world. They knew about them long before school, and there's a benefit. It doesn't mean to the school-based members that you're not doing their job. However, many school-based members feel that way because parents have so much outside support. Does that make sense? And so, most parents are able to get whatever outside supports they need. So there's kind of giving some light around that. Okay. Comorbidities. And so comorbidities is really so very important, and eligibility order. So we talked earlier about that little boy who was visually impaired in Texas. And then when he got in a plane, he went to Nevada. He's not. Comorbidities are your educational disabilities that occur at the same time, right? They're co-current. The way you would educate a child with autism is different than the way you would educate a child with autism and ADD. It just is. What I find at schools is it's the same thing. You have 2 eligibilities, 6 eligibilities, we got the same awesome, junky, skunky, funky IEP, right? But I have to hold up and go, what's this? Did the other pages not print out? Because this is only 6 pages long, right? So you're going to have to be able to articulate how they are co-current and how they impact the kiddo. I am on several, I don't know the website right now, but I will look it up tonight. An academia publishing documentation that I get monthly. I pay for it, but it gives me really great research-based stuff that goes in journals about, co-occurring this, in this type of population that's impacted by Title I schools or English language learners. Those are all important components, right? And so I'm going to get that information for you guys tonight. I recommend that you, subscribe to it. It really just gives you good data. It helps source people. This is not an unusual comorbidity with these other factors, right? And so it's really important that you know how they work together and what is the order. And the reason that we need to know the order is which has the greater impact. So usually on the software that we use in Texas, it's different everywhere else, it will list the top three eligibilities. It doesn't mean you don't have others, but it will list the top three. What I do know is for federal funding and reimbursement, if you have a speech eligibility, it has to be in the top three, or the school district won't get funding. I had a disagree with my client in the meeting in front of the school. That's enjoyable. And so I was like, no, speech has to be top three so that the school district can get reimbursed. And she said, I don't care if they get reimbursed. Well, I do, right? So you have to be in those situations where mom just wasn't happy. It didn't change services, but those are important pieces that you need to know. If a student has a sensory disability, it has to be primary. There's no way you have a vision impairment and it's number 2 behind ADHD. Not a possibility, right? So if you have deaf blindness, deaf or hard of hearing, or vision impairment, it has to be primary. Why does it have to be primary? Because it's a sensory disability that impacts what? Everything, right? And that person, which is going to be the CTVI, the certified teacher of the visually impaired. And if you're an advocate, you need to go make friends with a certified teacher of the visually impaired. Ashley Masheri, who is, I actually interviewed her. She's on the special education YouTube. She's on the TikTok. Go be friends with her and just say, Karen said you would be my best friend. She is a legend and teacher of the blind and visually impaired. And because you're going to have kiddos that are VI, you're going to have stuff and you're going to go, can you look at this? And she's going to tell you, this is junk, right? So her name is Ashley Masheri. So she was on, I just to quickly look it up on the YouTube channel, our YouTube channel, Special Education Academy. I did an interview with her there. Adorable. You'll see her Monday night in the academy since they're all going to be there for at least a month starting this Monday. But she's just been a great resource. She's been a great resource because there's language that you don't have. I didn't know what Nemeth math was. I'm like, is that a guy I went to junior high with? Nemeth? I don't even know if that is, right? Is he from, Lord of the Rings? I don't know. You need to have language meetings that you need to get quickly from other professionals, right? I've done a lot of research, but whatever goes in the front, something comes out the back, right? So I only have so much gigabyte or floppy drive. I don't know what I have, right? So she is amazing. Deaf and hard of hearing. I want you to become friends with Sarah Milam at Hands and Voices. She is amazing. You need to get this book because you're going to be educating or advocating for kiddos that are deaf and hard of hearing. This is on their website, handsandvoices.org, handsandvoices.org. This is educational advocacy. I know somebody really smart will drop it in the chat like it's hot. So it's educational advocacy. If you buy it at Texas Hands and Voices, they only sell like 4 books. And this is an amazing workbook for, it says educational advocacy for students who are deaf or hard of hearing, the Hands and Voices guidebook. It tells you everything from how to be in the IEP meeting, what you ask for. There's different language that you use. When I sit in a meeting with a student that is deaf or hard of hearing, deaf, blind, or vision impaired, and I say, I don't see his DHH for his, I don't see his ECC for his DHH. They just look at me like I just, screamed. Nobody usually at the IEP table knows anything about ECC. Nothing. They have no idea what I'm talking about. Expanded core curriculum. You have to understand expanded core curriculum. It's not Common Core. People get that confused. Expanded core curriculum just says these students with these disabilities must have curriculum that's outside of the state standards. They must have curriculum that's outside of the state standards. So for instance, a child that's visually impaired, it's a requirement in their expanded core curriculum that they learn their environment, right? That I'm going to learn how to cross the street. I'm going to learn how to ambulate in buildings in my community. I'm going to learn how to walk in everything in my environment, whether it's downtown. And actually, there's a requirement that we take a child, even if they're remote, that we take them to downtown and teach them to walk in the streets and how to access their environment. So those are things that are outside of a general ed teacher's what they're teaching: self-advocacy, assistive technology, parent training. There's just a lot of stuff that they have to have, because obviously that's going to affect them for a lifetime. And so if you're a good advocate, you will surround yourself with other people that are ridiculously smart, because when these families come to you, and they're just going to come to you, and I can say with complete conviction, any of you really could be a full-time advocate within 6 months, if that long. You could say, hey, I'm a special education advocate and I'm not really good at it. And people are going to call you, right? Just the fact, just introducing yourselves, no more than I knew when I sat down at the IEP table the first time, right? So when we often talk about schools aren't educated, teachers aren't educated, parents aren't educated. They don't know, what are you saying? ECC, PCS, VIP, UPS, OPP, you down with you? I mean, they don't have any idea what you're talking about. They don't have any idea what you're talking about. We just roll through it and then we go, do you have any questions? Why are you talking like that? No, I don't have any questions because I don't know what you just said, right? So when we start to advocate for somebody, you're serving them in all ways. You're serving them to tell them what church camp in the summer takes kids with disabilities, where to get a haircut if you're going to have sensory. You're going to help them in everything, like how to get rid of their current husband. I'm just kidding. That's another class. Costs a little bit more. You're going to tell them everything, because their child's disability impacts everything, right? And you have that information. So the more that you can partner with other professionals, the better. And people just need help. This is what I tell people all the time. They're like, well, Karen, I really like the school. Do you want to change somebody's life? Mm-hmm. You want to change somebody's destiny? Yeah. And I love schools, and I hope you guys stay that really enjoy it. But I rarely meet somebody in a school that's not working their way up the administrative ladder, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong, right? If your heart is to be a superintendent, a lead at the district level, I get it. But there's very few teachers that I talk to, the ones that are paras, right? That are really getting the liberty and freedom to serve their kids in a way that they know in their heart is right? Not so much from instructional and related service providers, because they're kind of out there on their own, but there are so many requirements and restrictions, and we're so busy training teachers at school to what to do in a lockdown and how to wash your hands, and there's nothing wrong with any of that, right? But I wish we spent equal amount of time of, this is a good reading program, right? Those sorts of things. So literally, when you decide to open this up and you put that out there, and I know that there are men watching this as well and training, but there is a phrase that says, tell a woman, tell the world. You have to make sure that the eligibilities and their orders are going to be commensurate with the services they're going to get. So what do I mean by that? So I can't tell you how many times that have had a kiddo that's a VI, SI, and OI, right? So they have vision impairment, speech impairment, orthopedic impairment. And they get more O&M than they get vision. What? right? So if that's an order, then the higher the order, it would at least be the same amount of service time we get and provision or goals, but not less, right? I'll have a kiddo that's a BI, they'll have one BI goal and 4 math goals. No, right? So we've got to get the very first page of the paperwork right. And we just, as Kevin Hart said, we're not going to just fly past, we're not going to just drive past that, are we? Right? So the first page is important. So when I ask for a draft, it's not really a request, it's a draft. So if we want to sit in a meeting and you want to send me 1 page at a time, then that's fine. We can do it that way. But I have to be able to take last year's IEP document and hold it up to this year's IEP document. And I'm an old person. I have 3 computers here, a printer 1 foot from here, and I have a laptop open, right? And I have my folders printed out, and I'm going to compare them this year and last year. I'm also going to be flipping through and go, hey, Jackson hasn't had a cognitive evaluation for 6 years, right? And now he's in 6th grade, and he was very, very smart. And I think he's not so very, very smart. We never had an academic need other than pass his initial evaluation. But I have all the information so I can, in that moment, make decisions for families, right? You can prep as much as you want, but it's when we sit down and start to have the conversation, when I have the conversation, because the laugh, he is doing great. Ugh. Can we just get rid of the word great? We're just like, ugh, he's doing great. He's a pleasure to have. The other kids, not so much, right? But when we get into the meeting and then I find out he can't read, but he is because we were so busy focusing on his AU and the behaviors from that, he can't read. So one disability is not the reason you struggle everywhere. It's just not. Your autism is not necessarily the reason that you struggle in reading. Reading because you have a specific learning disability, right? So when we all become assumptive, so when we have all of those out, and you're going to have to be going back, because I had a kid the other day, his eligibilities flipped. His ADHD is now more impactful than his autism, which is great. The strategies that we taught him for his autism have mitigated and subsided somewhat. They're still there, but his ADHD is, it is in your face right now. I don't know why. Does it matter why? Does it matter if they stopped medicine, started medicine, puberty? I don't know. But we had to change the order of that, right? So that we know how we most appropriately serve him and where the bulk of the IEP goals and or supports come from. Does that make sense? So those things move because this is a living, breathing document. This is a living, breathing human, I hope, that you're advocating for. We just living, breathing people is who we advocate for. Those are the comorbidities and the eligibility order. It is your job to assume, as the advocate, nobody has ever looked at the paper. And you should assume that, right? You should assume that the lovely IEP facilitator did 17 ARD preps last night, and she probably did. I had an ARD facilitator or IEP facilitator, when they're switching out screens and then you see all their emails open, not that I looked. And her calendar was open, and she was doing 12 IEP meetings that day. Don't even ask me what I want to say about that. Because we're just running them through, right? You have to realize the very high percentage of people that never come to their IEP meeting for a myriad of reasons. They don't understand. Andrea's face, she's like, that's not true. It is true. More than 50% of people never go to an IEP meeting for a number of reasons, right? You're the teacher. You're doing a great job. Thank you so much for all you're doing for him. So just send me the paperwork when you're done. Because either they feel uncomfortable in that space. We all talk IEP. They can't take off another day of work. They'll lose their job. They can't do that. And they don't really have any input when they get there. They're fine with whatever you're doing. You have to realize that as it relates to school, like most people don't show up ever. And then when they do show up, they don't speak. And then when they do show up, they don't disagree. And then when they do show up, they don't disagree and have an ask for you to change something. And they certainly are not giving you a research-based paper from Indiana that just talked about the impact of pulling kids into the pod instead of putting them in a resource class. Like that, nobody's asking them what are their correct words per minute and how's their accuracy. Is he replacing words? Is he flipping? Is he pretending to have words? Why is she talking? Right? So there aren't good advocates out there. Let me just clear that up. most advocates are the A word, and it's not amazing. I promise you, I'm in a city of 7 million people, and the great two young ladies that are from here, Amanda and the great Elizabeth, can tell you by nodding that most advocates need to be bonked on the head. Is that correct? It is correct. And it would be a bad use of a good bonking on the head instrument. They're just banana heads. It's a nice Christian word you can say about your relatives, banana heads. Like they're just jerks. They just come in and yell at people. And there was an advocate here in this city, I won't tell you their name. And they walked into the room, stepped up on the chair, and stepped up on the middle of the table. Now, I haven't done that since the 80s. I'm just kidding. Anyway, so, and that advocate said, let's get this party started. I've seen advocates opening email. Like if you send me an email, I'll tell you, send me a summary email, I send you my documents. And their opening email says to parents, we will find every skeleton in the school district closet. Well, why are you doing that? Like, seriously? There's good news and bad news everywhere. There's good people and bad people everywhere. There's good people and bad people in church. There's good people and bad people in jail. Why are you already poking the parent who already has PTSD? Right? So then by the time that advocates get into the meeting, they're like, I know there's other stuff. Right? And so a lot of times those advocates have what I call frothed up the client. I don't do that. My job is to shh. That's all. Like, let's take a breath, get a snack, etch a sketch, and come back in 5 minutes, right? But I know any of you that work at schools, you've seen some advocates, you're like, thinking of another word that starts with A. It's not advocate. So you have a lot to overcome in that space because most people are not enjoyable to be around that call themselves advocates. And that is unfortunate. It just makes the gap bigger between you and the parent and the school. So when I have people that call that want to lawyer up or let him have it or blow up the school district, I say, well, that's fine. Will he be continuing school after tomorrow? Because like if he's never going to go and this is your moment in time, I don't want to be attached to that. That doesn't benefit me at all. I'm going to serve kids for at least another 20 years. So it doesn't benefit me, doesn't benefit the teacher, it doesn't benefit, like we're supposed to be working together as a team. So that is something that needs to be your goal, that you are integrous and you do what's right as an advocate in those settings.
Hit subscribe, share this with a friend, and you know what? Meet me back here every single week. We're not just talking about change, we're making it. Because when you know better, you do better. And when we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody.